All right, hey everybody, we're gonna try this video situation. This is the first time I've done it, so bear with me, but it seemed like this would be easier than taking screenshots and making a document with arrows and stuff pointing. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to share my screen and go through some of the tools in Photoshop that you will need in order to complete the next part of the assignment. So at this point, you have reviewed the Principles of Design PowerPoint and or PDF that I uploaded. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to use those texture photographs that you took maybe before the storm, maybe during the storm, maybe after the storm, and apply those to new compositions, taking into consideration the principles of design that you looked at either Monday night or sometime on Tuesday. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen, and then you'll probably see a little me up in the corner as I'm talking. And so there we go. Okay, there's my Zoom screen. So I'm going to come down here to Photoshop. Now, some of you had the opportunity of going through some of the basics of Photoshop with me right before the storm in that first week, and half of you did not. So let me just go ahead and review a little bit of the workspace here for everybody. So when you open Photoshop, and something to keep in mind is that my version of Photoshop is older than the version that you're going to be using. And I apologize for that, but I still haven't gotten my university computer, and so I don't have my updated Adobe account. And the hurricane just slowed all that down. So bear with me. The tools are all the same. They may just be in slightly different places, okay? So the basic workspace is that you've got, this big blank area, which is where you're going to be working. On your left, you're going to find your toolbar. These are individual tools that you can do things to your document with. Up in this area, this is what I call the top menu. You will see a number of different things, and these things change based on what tool you have chosen in your toolbar. So you can see there's different properties up here for whatever you're using on the left. Up here is the main menu, or the the super top menu. It's where you're going to find things that look familiar, like file, edit. These are things that you probably would see in a Word document, a word processing program, and they act pretty much the same. There are some new menu options up there, like image and layer, that maybe you haven't seen in a Word document before, but we'll go over what those things are. On the right-hand side of your workspace, you're going to have these various windows. Right now, in my basic work setup, I have layers open, my layers palette, and I have my adjustments palette open, and then I also have my color swatches open. And this is just kind of the basic essential workspace. If when you open your Photoshop and it doesn't look like this, you can always reset it to the default settings by going to Window and then Workspace and Reset Essentials. And mine's not going to change because I just kind of always work in that Essentials workspace. So we're just going to throw the whole how-to poster out the window. If you did it, awesome. If you want to turn it in, I'm happy to give you extra credit for it. But I'm going to just jump into the next thing, okay? So this is going to just be a walkthrough of how to do the Principles of Design compositions using Photoshop. Okay. So the first thing that I want you to do is I want you to create a new document. And again, this is much like when you're using a word processing program. You're going to go to File, New. And once you get your new window, new dialog box open here, we're gonna go through in the order that the PowerPoint was in. So the first one was repetition. So we're gonna title this repetition. And then we're gonna go through these settings, and you're gonna start with the size of your document. Let's go ahead and make these 10 inches wide by 8 inches tall. Now double check in here in this menu that you have in fact inches selected and not pixels. And also not centimeters, millimeters, points, picas, or columns. Let's go with inches. Maybe one day we'll join the rest of the world in the metric system, but for now we're going to work with the English system because it's the system we all understand. And do make it 10 inches wide by 8 inches high. It's going to be landscape oriented. The next important thing to pay attention to is the resolution. And we'll talk about this probably with every project that you do. But we are going to work with a resolution of 300 pixels per inch. And this is a good resolution for print quality. We're not going to be printing anything at this point, but we are going to be doing projects that I hope at some point you think are worth getting printed out. And it may be that next semester I'll hit you up and be like, hey, you did a really amazing job on that texture project. Do you mind if I print this and put it up on the board in the hallway? And so because of that, I want you to work with a 300 pixels per inch resolution. Our color mode is going to be RGB color, which stands for red, green, blue color. And let's go ahead and keep it at 8-bit. Let's keep the background contents white. And the color profile, we're going to leave as Adobe RGB. The pixel aspect ratio will leave as square pixels as well. So after you've done all that, you're going to say okay, and you're going to have this brand new blank canvas. This is where we're going to be doing our composing. Now, the next step is to open one or more of my texture photographs, okay? So what I've done ahead of time is I took all the photographs with my phone, and then I went ahead and uploaded them onto my desktop, and I put them into a folder called textures. All right, so I'm gonna go to File, Open, and I'm going to navigate to those textures. So I've got my stuff under Desktop, and then McNeese, and then Digi, and then Textures. And I'm gonna go through and take a peek at these texture photographs that I took like the day before the hurricane. And I really, really, really like this texture. So I'm gonna open that one. And you may have seen this in the texture examples that I posted. This is a photograph of a piece of plexiglass that I found in the art building, and it's got little bits of paint and ink and dirt scraped on it. And I just really, I love this as an image by itself, but I'm gonna use it as my source material. And you can use any of the texture photographs that you took. You can use more than one. I became so enamored with this one image that I went ahead and made examples completely using just this one. So that's okay too. If you took 10 photographs and you decided that one of them was really worth spending all of your time on, totally cool. If you get bored with one of them and you decide you want to use a different one for each separate, or you want to combine texture photographs, totally fine as well. Okay, So the first thing that I want you to do is I want you to double check the size of this image. It's going to be based on whatever camera you used. It is probably going to be different than the size that mine is, but what we're going to do is we're going to make them all about the same size. So you're going to go up here to image and image size. And it's going to show you, just ignore this top part. The document size is 56 inches by 42 inches, but it's only a resolution of 72. 72 pixels per inch is a standard screen size or screen resolution. So what we're going to do is first we're going to change that resolution to 300 so that it matches the document that we are then going to be moving bits and pieces of this one into. So in order to do that and to not have the computer make up information for us, what we're going to do is we want to make sure that these three things, the width, the height, and the resolution, are all locked into place. So to do that, if they're not locked into place, mine is not currently locked, I'm going to uncheck this resample image button. So what I'm looking for is I'm looking for this like lock symbol and then that it's pointing at all three of those things. And now I'm going to change the resolution to 300. And you'll see that the physical dimensions changed with it. That's because what we did was we made all the pixels tinier. And so we had to make the document size tinier. Now, I also, I mean, the most important thing is to make sure that the resolution is the same from one document to the other because we're going to be copying and pasting. But this is still a larger document than what I'm going to be pasting into. So I'm going to shrink it down just a tad. And when I do that, I am going to now unlock these three things. I want the resolution, because if I were to go in here and start messing with the physical dimensions, it would change the resolution that I so carefully set as 300. So I'm now going to check that box so that only these two are attached or locked. And knowing that the height of my other document is 8 inches, I'm going to go ahead and make this one 8 inches as well. And you'll see that then my width automatically changes to keep those proportions together so it doesn't get like smushed in a weird way. And that's because this is locked. All right. And it's okay that it's wider than the document that we're going to be pasting into. I just wanted to bring it to a size that was a little bit closer than what it originally was. So now I'm going to say okay. And it shrinks down a little bit. It doesn't make a huge visual difference on the screen, but it does make a big difference in the data. I'm going to come down here to my magnifying glass or my zoom tool, and I'm going to zoom in just a tad so that I can see all those glorious textures. And you'll note that when I chose that tool, you know, I depressed the button and then I had to bring the cursor over the image and actually had to click on the image in order for that tool to do anything. Now I'm too zoomed in, so I need to zoom back out. And like I was saying before, up here in the top menu, this is where all of the subset things for your tools are. So now I'm going to go to the minus mark and I'm going to zoom out. Keep in mind that there are a lot of different ways to do anything in Photoshop, and if you know of another way of doing it, by all means, please do. There's also keyboard shortcuts and stuff like that, and so sometimes when I'm making these videos, because I think I'll do more than this, I'm in the habit of keyboard shortcutting, and if you notice me doing that and you're like, what are you doing? Shoot me an email and I can explain that. I'll try not to do it too much, or if I do, I'll try and tell you what it is that I'm doing. Okay, so on to this task of copying and pasting. I'm going to come up to my toolbar and I'm going to choose this rectangular marquee tool. And you'll notice that with all of the tools, if you hold down, if you press on it and hold down, you'll get some other options. I want for this, for what I'm doing, I want the rectangular marquee tool. It gives me a crosshairs, and what it allows me to do is draw a box of marching ants. It drew this particular rectangle because I already had some presets put in here. So I'm going to deselect that. I'm gonna get rid of the marching ants by going to select and deselect. The keyboard shortcut, and this is one I use a lot, is Apple D or Control D to deselect. So I'm gonna change this here from fixed size to normal. And this allows me to like free form draw a rectangle of marching ants. This is like highlighting something in a Word document. So I've highlighted a selection that I want to copy and paste and put into a different paragraph, all right? So this is doing the same sort of thing. You can, for your projects, you can feel free to like make a selection just like that, just draw it, call it good. I am a little bit of a perfectionist, and so I'm actually going to go in here, and I just went Apple D, and I am going to give it a fixed size, and that fixed size is going to be 1 inch wide by 10 inches tall. So now when I just bring my cursor into my document and click once, it creates a rectangle of marching ants that is exactly 1 inch by 10 inches. Now I can move that selection around by putting my cursor inside of the marching ants. You have to make sure that you're still on that rectangular marquee tool. And I can now move it around. I'm just dragging it to find some like interesting section of this photograph. So I like that. And now I'm going to copy and paste it. So just like in a Word document, you're going to go to Edit, Copy, and just like in a Word document, the keyboard shortcut is Apple C or Control C if you're on a PC. And then I'm going to come over to that blank document that I made, and I'm going to paste the thing that I just copied. It already looks 100% cooler. Now I can come up to the Move tool, and I can grab onto that thing that I just pasted, and I can move it around. I can also continue to paste that same thing over and over and over. I'm using my arrow tools to just scooch these into the like perfect place once I get it close with my move tool. And what do we see happening here? Oh, I'm just talking to myself. We're seeing repetition, right? And what I'll ultimately do is just fill this entire canvas with this one selection that I made, that I copied and pasted from the original photograph into the new document. Voila, I've completed the repetition part of my assignment. Now, a couple of things that I want you to notice. One, every time I pasted another one of these rectangles, a new layer was created. And you can see in the thumbnails that they correspond with each of those little slivers. It's like I just cut up the photograph and then I have all these little strips. And if when you're trying to move these around, if your mouse doesn't automatically recognize what is underneath it, go up here to your sub menu or your top menu and make sure that auto select is chosen. On the other hand, if you know you want to move, say, layer 5, but you can't remember or you can't tell from the thumbnail which one of these is layer 5, you can turn that off. And if you have layer 5 highlighted over here, it's going to be the only one that moves no matter where your mouse is, okay? I like to work with auto select on for the majority of the work that I do. And you'll find your best way of working. From here, I want you to go ahead and save it as a Photoshop document and as a JPEG, and you're going to turn the JPEG into me. The Photoshop document is for you if sometime in the future you're like, oh man, I made this really great repetition thing in my art in the computer class, and I want to reuse that and use it as a background for something else. Well, you can then open it up in Photoshop and you'll still have all of your Photoshop editing capabilities. So I'm going to go to File and Save As. And I already named the document Repetition. And I want to make sure that I know where it's going, right? So I'm going to make sure that it's in my Digi folder. And actually, I don't like it showing in calendar form, so I'm going to do it under alphabetical order. And I'm going to go ahead and make a new folder in here that's called Texture Compositions. You name yours whatever you want, as long as you know what it is, right? And then I'm going to go ahead. I mean, if you were feeling like extra ultra organized, you could make another folder in here of PSD files and then one of JPEG files. But, you know, you're only going to end up with 10 files, so it's not going to be too crazy. So I'm just going to save them all in here. So I'm going to save this one as just a regular Photoshop document. That is going to be the default. Once you have layers going, once you press Save As, it's going to automatically want to save it as a Photoshop document, so that's cool. I'm going to say yes. Then it's going to give me this maximize compatibility. That just is asking you if you want to be able to open this in different versions of Photoshop, and yes, you do. So I'm going to say yes. And after I've saved that, then I'm going to go to File and Save As again so that I can save my JPEG version. And now I'm going to come down here and I'm going to change this from Photoshop to JPEG. And it should automatically, you know, have you in that folder you just created, but if it doesn't, just double check, make sure you know where it's going so that you know where to find it later. Now it's going to ask you this JPEG quality options. Just make sure that you're on the highest quality and you want your format option to be baseline standard. Bada bing, bada boom. Repetition done. Here are a few things that you can explore as you work on examples for the other 4 principles of design. You don't have to use a rectangle for your marquee tool. So let's say I have started working on my variety version. Again, making sure when you make a new document that you're paying attention to the physical dimensions. So make them all 10 by 8 inches, please. Double check all of these things, 300, RGB color, 8-bit, white, color profile. How did that happen? Let's go back to Adobe RGB. This is why you always double check. And square pixels. So let's say I'm, you know, again, working from the same source image. You don't have to use a rectangle. You could use the elliptical marquee tool, and you could create a new composition, and I just copied, out of nothing but circles. I love this texture because these look like planets. And that's something that shows up in my own work a lot. But I'm just showing you that you could use the rectangular marquee tool. Now, if you wanted to get real fancy, you could come over here and instead of using one of these preset rectangle or elliptical marquee tools, the single row marquee tool and the single column, they don't function very well, but you can try them out. It just gives you like a single row of pixels, so it's very tiny. You could go wild and you could choose the lasso tool, and the lasso tool lets you free form select or free form draw marching ants. So now I've got this crazy shape that I can copy and paste. And again, every time you copy and paste something, it makes a new layer, which means you can move stuff around. So far, this is not a very pretty composition. Maybe what I need to do is rotate this blobby shape. Let me show you how to do that. Again, you don't have to use, now we're just into like bells and whistles, but these are things that I think are fun and give you a little bit more control over what you're doing. So let's say I wanted to rotate this blobby guy. I'll make sure I'm on my move tool, and then up here in this menu, I'm gonna turn on the show transform controls. Now you'll see I have a box around the blobby thing. And here, if I bring my cursor close to the corner, I can click and drag and I can rotate. So maybe this is the best orientation for the blobby thing. I can also squish this if I want. I don't know about that. I can also scale it down if I want, or scale it up. Notice though that as I'm doing it, it's also getting a little bit distorted because it's not holding its original proportions. If I want it to maintain its original proportions, I can hold down the shift key as I drag one of the corners, and it will maintain its original proportions. So that's a helpful tool. Notice too that after I have made those adjustments, I have to confirm those adjustments, and I just press the enter key on my keyboard, but you can also, so let's say I moved it again, you can also press the check mark up here. So if you find that you've moved something and you're like, all right, yeah, I'm ready to do the next thing, and you're trying to move something else and it doesn't move, just make sure that you have confirmed that transformation is what it's called. And then if you don't like seeing these, this bounding box, then you can just turn the transform controls off. One last thing. This is like teaching in the classroom. One last thing that I want to show you. Let's say I really like that blobby thing and I really like this blobby thing at this scale. I can make copies of it by just copying that layer. So that's in layer 6. And I can double check that by turning the eyeball on and off. Oh yeah, that's layer 6. And I can duplicate this layer by dragging it onto the new layer button. There's also probably a keyboard shortcut that I don't know about, but if you find it, awesome. And now I've got more than one blobby thing. I can also decide that all of these circles were a bad idea and I want to just work with blobby things. So I can turn off the visibility for all of those and I can keep working with my blobby thing. Oh, where did my other one go? Oh, there it is. Now remember with the this one that I started, variety, we're looking for not, you don't want to make just a crazy splotch of a whole bunch of things. You want some continuity, but you want a little bit of variety within that continuity. So, you know, when you're looking at this repetition one, yeah, it's cool, but you know, it just looks like the like a desktop wallpaper or something, right? So adding a little bit of variety to this just gives it more visual appeal, right? Um, so let me show you just the various examples that I went ahead and made earlier, just to give you an idea of what I'm looking for. And again, keep in mind, I just got so enamored with this one photograph of texture that I just used that one. You are more than welcome to use all 10 of them. You can use, you know, multiple bits from different photographs in the same composition. You do you. So I'm going to open. Okay, so this is the repetition version that I basically just did that in the demo, but here's the one I did earlier to make sure that it was going to turn out okay. I'm pretty pleased with it. Then I just worked right off of that one to create this variety, and you're welcome to do that. You're welcome to take your repetition and just add to that file, and make sure that when you save it, you do save as, so that you're not writing over the original file. And all I did here was I took the pasted bit that was right here, and I just tilted it on its side. And then I took a round selection from that same photograph and just plopped it in over here. And then I used the paint bucket tool to fill this space in with a dark brown. The paint bucket tool is over here, and you choose your color by clicking on this. And all I did was, when you click on that and you get this color window, you can, if you bring your mouse outside of the color chooser, it gives you an eyedropper. And I just chose this dark brown from within my composition already. And it turns out that was what color it was. And I was like, all right, cool, sounds good. And then using the paint bucket, you click on the paint bucket and then you click on that space and it will fill with color. You're not required to use the paint bucket for this assignment. It's just a fun added thing that you can do. The next one that I did was economy. And here, you know, we're looking at the idea of not overcrowding your design. You'll notice that I avoided putting anything right in the dead center. I mean, there is something right here, but you know, a good rule of thumb is never to put something right exactly on the center line. So this is just a little bit off center, creating some visual excitement. But the whole thing isn't filled with these rectangles, which once I got to this point, I realized all I was doing was making fallen trees, which is what I'm surrounded by. But I also just am quite pleased with that composition. And the last example that I created was balance. And you can see I went through a couple different versions of this, and finally was happiest with this one. Again, still working completely from that single photograph, using very simply the rectangular marquee tool and the elliptical marquee tool to copy and paste, and then the paint bucket tool to fill this space in, and the transform tool to rotate these circles around and to rotate this one long, skinny guy. And so as you're working, play with it, have fun with it. I, especially with this balance one, I did it, and then I let it sit for a couple of hours, and I came back and I looked at it again. And I also stood up and looked back. And so I don't encourage you to do these all in like one quick setting. I would allow yourself, maybe give yourself a good 3 or 4 hours to complete all 5 of these. I didn't show you an example of unity. And I want you to think about how best you can create something that has a unified feel to it, right? I'll give you a hint. I would say that all of my examples are unified in their color palette. So give that some thought, and maybe don't set aside one block of 4 hours to work on them, but maybe work on them for an hour, go work on some other homework or other projects, or just go outside and go for a walk or a jog, and then come back and revisit these, because you'll see new things every time you come back to them. That is it for now. These are due on Tuesday morning, and I will create an assignment in Moodle so that you can upload the JPEGs into that assignment, okay? And as always, if you have questions, email me. I'm also happy to meet via Zoom. My internet is still kind of spotty, as I imagine a lot of yours is. But I'm still willing to give it a go if you want to have a one-on-one idea brainstorming chat or something. And I'm also happy to correspond via email. So I hope you guys are all doing okay, and hang in there and make some great compositions. I can't wait to see them. All right, transmission over.